leveraging the power of these information intermediaries that have APIs and other tools, we can democratize access to data in ways that would be far faster than if we relied on the federal government to modernize our own systems, which we want to do, but will take time. Question number 2. New products. I love this question. What constitutes high-value data? Everybody has an opinion, but no opinion is as effective as what works in the market. Who would have thought an obscure Labor Department formatted file that every employer completes that lists out the details of their 401k plan, which includes the management fees they pay, would be such a rich source of data? This is a great story personally because the folks actually finally met these guys in San Diego, or they came up from San Diego to LA. They literally started this in the Bush administration. They had to walk into the Labor Department's library equivalent and pay 5 cents a page Xeroxing 60-page filings. You couldn't scale that enterprise all that well. Now, because the default setting switched from you got to do it that complicated way to make it easier, they're getting electronic files from the Labor Department. Again, I'd never heard of this. This wasn't one of those high-value data sets that was like in the news. This is an obscure piece of information. But now you can see the chart on the far left, just the sheer volume of how much they've been able to upload into their system after the Open Government Memorandum from the President. They now have over 90% of all corporate assets under management have their data. But the scatter plot is the part that freaked me out. They identified $4 billion in excess fees paid by employers and de facto employees who are not having that money go into their retirement accounts, but going into paying higher fees on financial advisory firms. The lack of transparency in this market has screwed retirees out of their money. And this company's making money, a new product, if you will, because they're able to take that information and translate it into an advisory service so that HR directors now have the information they need to compete effectively for lower priced, higher value 401k plan managers. Third question. Open platforms. What are the policy implications of enabling third-party applications? In today's resource-constrained world, when we have a mission objective that our agencies have attempted to fulfill with a government program, we know going in that we're not going to have enough money to see that project all the way through to the end. The notion of third-party application development on APIs, as an example, is a very complicated one in the policy context. Should we allow third parties to compete for that last mile of service delivery? If so, what are the implications? I had the pleasure of chairing the health IT standards going into the insurance program. Secretary Sebelius endorsed these in the fall of 2010, so that when the new health insurance exchanges come online in each of our 50 states, one of the questions we grapple with is, how do we enable a new competitive market for third-party applications so that enrollment in a new health insurance product may not necessarily happen on a government portal? If in fact it could be constituted using a third-party application. Maybe, I know Lynchburg, Virginia very well. It's a very lovely community in the center of the Commonwealth. One major health system, all the nonprofits coordinate with each other. What if they built an app together that allowed them into their existing workflow to enroll people into health insurance by consuming an API and providing value add? We put the technical specifications in the recommendations so that our states could evaluate whether they wanted to enable third-party applications. But we're just starting to see the fruits of that activity. We funded an R&D program at Harvard, where last week I had the pleasure of announcing, or 2 weeks ago now, they've launched the SMART program, which is basically allowing for substitutable medical applications on top of their common platform. There are now opportunities to build those innovative medical apps, even though you know it's so hard to have your app adopted at a hospital or a doctor's office because their IT systems are clunky and very hard to pull data out of. This platform allows them to have access. So we're starting to see what could happen if you made it frictionless, if you will, to build those kinds of applications. And the contest is now up and running, the $5,000 contest. I can't wait to tell you it'll come out May 31st. But there is a ton of research needing to be done to understand what the policy implications are of extending these kinds of services. Last. Fourth question. 2 more left. International collaboration. I had the pleasure of serving as the chair of the President's India-US Open Government Dialogue that was signed and announced as part of his trip to India. What are the policy implications on how we strengthen democracy? How do we translate these principles that we've seen in the US internationally? The President gave an impassioned speech at the UN last September calling on a global movement built around the principles of openness. And you can see what the President saw firsthand when he visited this, through the power of the internet essentially, connected to a very, very remote village in India, where today they now have access to the world's information because they've built fiber connections to a community that literally thousands of people live disconnected from almost any other major service in life. The President noticed this and realized quickly this is about leapfrogging. He saw and witnessed firsthand the kind of leapfrogging ability that technology and innovation can be put to use. And imagine the e-democracy applications that will come out of these platforms. We're actively engaged in this issue. Last question, and then we're off to the panel. Digital norms. What works and what doesn't work in public engagement? These new tools on the internet are powerful in identifying talent where knowledge is widely dispersed. We put our pedal to the metal, if you will, because Beth, our resident genius, decided that when we had to make recommendations on open government, rather than just do it in the traditional Washington way, she said, if we're going to make recommendations about open government, why don't we adopt the principles of openness in crafting those recommendations? So we went on a three-part structured dialogue where we brainstormed, discussed, and then eventually collaborated in the drafting of recommendations. Over 30,000 people participated in that initial experiment, including a bunch of folks that cared about UFOs and other random things. But we actually captured a lot of great and valuable information that directly mapped to the end product, which was the OMB guidance on openness for the agencies. Very much benefited from this structured dialogue. So we get it. We were eating our own dog food, so to speak. We get the power of harnessing the internet, but we're also aware of the need for more research in digital norms. Anonymity. What role does anonymity play in how the quality of the conversation should go? What does it mean if you were more authenticated and if there was a more trusted and secure network within the internet? We saw an example of this when the President 2 weeks ago convened folks around the issue of bullying in our schools. And we asked the private sector to step up, and many of them did. In the case of cyberbullying, as an example, Facebook announced a whole series of technological enhancements to their platform that would allow you to report bullying activity, and more importantly, as you can see here, phone a friend. I'll ask for help from a trusted friend to see whether or not the particular offending remarks or photographs are things that require or deserve further evaluation. By allowing the trusted internet to engage in these issues, we are just at the very beginning of a conversation about what our policy framework should be, harnessing this power of openness, but thinking about these issues in the question of societal norms. So these are just a few of the questions that I'm hopeful you might help us answer. And I challenge you in the final observation in this way. I've got it overtime. I've challenged you in the following way. By the end of the session tomorrow, I'm hopeful you will have engaged on these 5 questions. But more importantly, I'm hopeful you will have coalesced around consensus recommendations for how we identify a particular problem or set of problems for which a challenge, a prize, a competition might inspire entrepreneurs and innovators to help us tackle. This is early days. Help us refine the problem statement. And let's get about the work of harnessing the power of our entrepreneurial spirit in this country to help move this conversation along. With that, I thank you for your time, and I look forward to calling up our first panel of rock stars to the stage. Please welcome Susan Crawford, Myron from the National Science Foundation, Shelley, my dear friend and colleague at the Office of Management and Budget, and Giovanni from the Transportation Department. Get on up here, folks. Give them a round of applause.